This is the MMA Brief Podcast, recapping the world of mixed martial arts every single week, with your host, Brandon Johansson.
Welcome back to the MMA Brief, recapping UFC Fight Night 107 from the O2 Arena in London, England. Headlined by Jimmy Posterboy Manawa and Corey Overtime Anderson. No one thought this was going to be the card of the year, and it wasn't. On a night that hosted 11 fights, 7 went to decision, 3 by split decision, which seems very rare to me. This was a Fight Pass exclusive event, and we're going to start with the prelims. Lena Landsberg looked to bounce back against Lucy Pudilova. Pudilova actually outlanded Lena Landsberg by 67 overall strikes, but Lena Landsberg got the unanimous decision. Bradley Scott defeated Scott Askham by split decision in the second fight of the night. In the third fight of the night was the most exciting of all knockouts, a 30-second knockout from Mark Diakiese. When he starched Teemu, landed some really nifty kicks, was throwing some really crazy stuff, and starched him with a left hand that had Packlin on the mat stiff. Woke up, didn't know what hit him, and Mark Diakiese looks like a real threat at 155 pounds. Next level striking. Very interested to see his next fight. Leon Edwards defeated Vicente Luque by unanimous decision. Luque was on a roll in the UFC with a couple of great performances in a row. This is merely a roadblock in his career, I'm sure. Leon Edwards called out Donald Cowboy Cerrone after the fight. Timothy Johnson edged Daniel Omielanczuk by split decision. Francimar Barroso defeated Darian Stewart by unanimous decision. There's a theme here. And to close out the prelims, Irish Joe Duffy finished out his UFC contract with a win over Reza Madadi by unanimous decision. Moving to the main card, 2 of the top prospects in the featherweight division, Arnold Almighty Allen versus Marwan Amirkhani. I really enjoyed the fight. It was back and forth. They're undoubtedly 2 of the most talented youngsters with extreme potential in the featherweight division. And it was an excellent fight. They went tit for tat. Arnold ended up edging Amirkhani by a slight margin. Brad One Punch Pickett versus Chito Marlon Vera. It was a very close fight going into the third round. Brad Pickett, his retirement fight in front of his home crowd in London, England, and he ended up getting TKO'd with a head kick in the third and final round of his career. Chito Vera mixed in knees. Brad Pickett was throwing heavy leather, and he got caught with a head kick, dropped to the ground, hit with 2 hammer fists, and the referee had saw enough. He never went out, and he said in his post-fight interview he would have rather been dead and stiff in there, especially in his last fight, but not a bad way to go out. It was very emotional watching him walk out of the octagon and the seating of the arena. The camera followed him the whole way. It was, you could see the hurt in his eyes. He wanted to win, especially in front of all of his friends and family in his last fight, and he didn't get that win, but there was potentially some moisture around my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't. Gunnar Nelson, yeah, I'm going to call him Gunnar still, because Joe Rogan's still calling him Gunnar in official UFC promos. I refuse to call him Gunnar. I'm calling him Gunnar until everybody's calling him Gunnar. I'm sick of this nonsense. Point is, Gunnar Nelson defeated Alan Jouban. Closely contested contest throughout the first few minutes of the opening round. But once Gunnar Nelson was able to secure a takedown, he mounted Alan Jouban in the first round, and Jouban, to his credit, did survive. In the second round, early on, Gunnar Nelson was able to stagger Jouban badly with the right hand, pull him to the ground easily, and secure a very deep guillotine choke. Gunnar Nelson decided he wanted the submission victory. In the main event, Jimmy Posterboy Manuwa knocked out Corey Anderson early in the first round. Corey's footwork looked good early on. It just took one big left hand from Jimmy Manuwa, and the show was over. Knocked him stiff, and suddenly Manuwa looks like a contender. Even though he's been knocked out by Gustafsson, Gustafsson was in his corner. They're friends now, apparently. And he was knocked out by Rumble Johnson, who's fighting for the title April 8th, UFC 210, against Daniel Cormier. So all of a sudden, Jimmy Manuwa becomes a contender in that division, especially with other things going on, like Ryan Bader signing with Bellator, a top 5 UFC light heavyweight, now gone from the rankings. And that is why Shogun Rua is ranked at number 6, is because Ryan Bader's gone. Everybody's established themselves in that division. Jimmy Manuwa has looked fantastic, but he already got knocked out by Rumble. I doubt he's beaten Daniel Cormier. I don't like his chances against Jones, so how are you getting past those top 3? You couldn't even get past Gustafsson, who's your boy now. I don't see you fighting him again, so how are you going to get past the top 4? I'm not hating. He's a contender now, but that division is a mess in the UFC. You know what division is not a mess? Is the welterweight division in Bellator, because they recently signed Lorenz Larkin. Now reunited with Scott Coker, he holds a victory over former UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler. And that division in Bellator is scary. Koreshkov, Diego Lima, Rory McDonald, Paul Daly, now Lorenz Larkin. You can't fuck around right now with Bellator's 170 division. And I made this argument 5 years ago on the Sherdog threads. I looked for it. They fucking put it in the wasteland for no reason, and it got deleted. What the guy said was, this topic has came up a lot. Nothing wrong with your thread, but there wasn't anything special about it either. So it's going in the wasteland where it belongs. So I don't have that to screenshot and show you, but I predicted this 5 years ago. I said Bellator would start getting into a bidding war with the UFC over top talent. People said, yeah, right. No way. They're a feeder organization. That's all they'll ever be. They're taking top talent. When you talk about them signing the GOAT, potentially, Fedor, over the UFC, they're taking talent from the UFC like Phil Davis, who's now their light heavyweight champion. A guy like Ryan Bader, who holds a win in the UFC over their champion. Their division now all of a sudden gets interesting. Whereas UFC's 205 is kind of boring. I already told you the layout. It's Jones. When Jones ain't around, it's Cormier. Cormier, if he beats Rumble again, it's real black and white. After Rumble, it's Gustafsson. After that, doesn't matter. But in Bellator's division, they got a champion in Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis, who's excellent. Now, you bring over a guy who's already beat him. That's an interesting fight. I want to see it. Ryan Bader going to be champ over there? I don't know. I'm excited about the potential. And I predicted this shit. And everybody said, no way. They'll always be a feeder organization. They're taking Eddie Alvarez right now. All this shit. Point is, Bellator MMA is still growing. But when they can acquire top talent that people want to watch, like myself, you're going to tune in. They're mostly getting a bad name because their events suck. Their main events especially. God rest his soul. Kimbo's fights against Ken Shamrock and Dada 5000, terrible. Also, Chael Sonnen versus Tito, not very good. But they're putting on fights that everybody's talking about. And they understand Scott Coker gets it. And now that Lorenz Larkin is teamed back up with Scott Coker, he's getting those Scott Coker guys. I talked about it a couple weeks ago with Josh Thompson. even though he lost. He's a Coker guy. Coker gets the promotional side of fighting. He's bringing in big names like Ryan Bader. And I'm interested to see that rematch. Kelvin Gastelum got his wish and is going to fight Anderson Silva at UFC 212 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Kelvin, of course, called out Anderson after his victory over Vitor, and I said then I favored Kelvin in a matchup, and I'm going to stick with that. I love Anderson Silva, but at this point of his career and this point of his chin, I favor Kelvin Gastelum. Unless Anderson's able to pull off a miracle where he just hits him something old school, and all of a sudden we go, God damn, he still got it. But I don't really see it happening. I think Calvin's probably going to steamroll him. Also, Derek Lewis versus Mark Hunt has been targeted for New Zealand UFC Fight Night 110 main event. A fight that the Black Beast has been asking for. Mark Hunt needs to get back in the winner's circle. Of course, 2 fights ago, that fight had been changed to a no contest against Brock Lesnar. Derek Lewis is a great name for him to take out, and he'll put himself right there. Derek Lewis wins. Man, he's adding legends to his name now. Mark Hunt to his resume, along with Big Country Roy Nelson and Travis Brown. Sky's the limit. Come back next week. We're going to preview UFC 210 from Buffalo. Daniel Cormier versus Rumble Johnson rematch for the light heavyweight title. Thanks for listening. Peace.